Me immediately walking into the room and seeing it dimly lit and everything, I had a momentary freak out. She explained to me that we're going to sit across from each other and put baby oil on, and her husband will come out at some point and watch. Through my peripherals, I had noticed that he is nude. He's wearing on his face like the Muslim face coverings, where a Muslim woman's face is completely covered and you can only see her eyes. Over the next 2.5 years, I would periodically be called back for similar encounters. It really took me to about a year to 15 months in to finally figure out who they were. The hotel had a welcome message for the guests, and I saw on the screen, Essex House would like to welcome Mr. Sean Combs. And it was like a no way, like a holy crap moment.
The bombshell sex trafficking trial against Sean Diddy Combs has finally started to wind down after a grueling 7 weeks of testimony. The 55-year-old rapper is accused of using his fame and fortune to run a decade-long scheme to control and manipulate people into acting out sick and twisted fantasies with freak-off sex marathons. Combs' manipulation also victimized his longtime girlfriend, R&B singer Cassie Ventura, who was seen in disturbing surveillance footage being brutally assaulted by the music mogul at a Los Angeles hotel in 2016. The Post sat down with exotic dancer and author Sharay "The Punisher" Hayes, who testified in court about his experience with some of Combs' voyeuristic sexual sessions.
My name is Sharay Hayes, more popularly known as The Punisher. I was a witness in the Sean Combs trial that is currently going on in the media. The nickname The Punisher, which everybody thinks comes from a crazy origin, but it's still associated with basketball. In my late teens, I started playing basketball on West 4th Street in the Cage. If you're a regular there, you get a nickname. And, my basketball talent gave me the name The Punisher, and I kind of just transitioned it into the male stripping business. At 22, I got an idea to become a stripper, and it wasn't from a conventional thought process. I broke up with my high school sweetheart. I was in this long-term relationship. I was in love. I thought I was going to get married. And one day she just came home and said, I'm going to start working in a female strip club. And as a young man, I had a heart attack. No, you're not, but she kind of didn't give me a choice. And I accepted it. And about a year into her being a female stripper, she came home and said, hey, I'm meeting all these guys. I want my freedom. And she dumped me. And so my heartbroken, immature decision was, I'll show her I'm going to be a stripper too, and then she'll see how it feels, and best breakup ever, got a whole career out of it. Yeah, so how the situation transpired in 2012 with Miss Ventura and Mr. Combs was, it started out like a regular party. The normal nature of booking a party is you get a call. The person tells you the celebration. In this scenario, she called as a woman named Janet. And she said that it was her birthday and she wanted to have a male dancer come to do a show for a small gathering of her and friends. So I did a normal booking scenario. I'll get the location and time. She called the day of, so the date was obvious. And, we set it up. So it was show up at the Trump International Hotel. The rate at the time to hire a dancer for a striptease was $200. And I showed up with the expectation of just doing a regular party. Typically, when I get booked for these parties, I'm showing up to, households where there's a party atmosphere. And this was specifically a hotel suite. So I'm expecting, the normal scenario. And in this situation, Miss Ventura opened the door in a bathrobe that suggestively was clear that she was nude under. And, like I stated earlier, attraction is a factor, right? So she opens the door and, she was literally probably the most attractive woman that I've seen in person in my life, right? So I'm kind of startled because I'm not, obviously the robe and the suggestive nudity was like, hey, what's going on? And very inviting, big smile. Hey, happy you're here. Come on in. And, I kind of proceeded in expecting a party. And got to the living room and quickly saw it dimly lit, no guests. And I kind of, obviously it was an indication that this was going to be something different. Me immediately walking into the room and seeing it dimly lit and everything, I had a momentary freak out, right? And the freak out, well, freak out pun based, the freak off, sorry. But I had just finished watching a movie called American Psycho. And if anybody's familiar with this movie, the killer would specifically cover all of his furniture in his living room in plastic before he was going to murder somebody. And walking into this dynamic, the setup in this living room, everything was covered with sheets. So my first reaction is I'm ushered into this dark hotel room and everything's covered in sheets. And I'm like, oh no, like this is going to turn into something terrible. But, I gained my composure and she immediately explained, look, I'm not interested in you actually doing a dance. Me and my husband like to set the sexy scene. She explained to me that we're going to sit across from each other and put baby oil on and her husband will come out at some point and watch. And I was specifically instructed to not look at him, not talk to him, do my best to not even acknowledge that he's present. And kind of just, create this scene that he would enjoy watching. After she explains it, I'm basically right by a bathroom in the living room area. So I was instructed to go in there and change to either underwear or a towel. I picked a towel. Prior to going into change, she handed me a stack of money, which was $800, which at the time was obviously 4 times more than what I quoted, was $200. So I'm going to try to make this work. And I come out probably in about 5 minutes with the towel on. I sit on a couch. She gets adjacent from me on a sofa. And we start to, sensually put oil on ourselves, put oil on each other. And I want to say about 3 to 5 minutes into this act, from my peripheral, I can see her husband enter the room. In the moment, there's definitely some discomfort, and most of it is going on in my mind, right? Because it's common now, but the idea of a male allowing another man to interact sexually with his wife or girlfriend was something that I wasn't exposed to. So I already have a thought process of, okay, let me be mindful. What if this guy gets jealous? What if he gets uncomfortable? What if this is something he's trying that doesn't work out? So there's already a degree of worry for me. And then when he finally walks into the room, I'm even more startled and taken back because through my peripherals, I noticed that he is nude, right? He's nude. And he's wearing on his face what's called, I believe, a hijab. So it's like the Muslim face coverings where a Muslim woman's face is completely covered and you can only see her eyes. So, just the concept of an adult male being in a room with you, completely nude, with his face covered, is just an extremely odd scenario. And then at times, he would also be self-pleasuring, masturbating. So all of this is going on through my peripheral. I'm trying to put oil on and focus and look sexy and create an environment at the same time. And then, the discomfort of could he get jealous? Like, could this, be a scenario that's out of his comfort zone that goes wrong, was just all the things I had to factor in that made it extremely challenging and uncomfortable. The session goes on, I want to say about 20 to 25 minutes. And again, it's just like a repetitive oil on myself. She's all in herself. We're all in each other. There are some suggestive things of her masturbating herself, me doing something similar. But that's the furthest it goes. And at some point, the husband, or Mr. Combs, as we know now, stands up and he leaves the room, which is a cue to her to follow him out. And she just follows him out and comes back and says, hey, that was perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. We're happy with you. Basically, thank you. And so I understand that it's concluded, but then I am offered the option of, she said, do you want to finish? Which I understand to be, do I want to orgasm? And again, because of my discomfort and the things that I was processing at the moment, I declined. I went a professional route and said, hey, look, I'm here to create this for you guys. You guys' pleasure and satisfaction is all that matters. I'm not worried about myself, so I'm good. So she understood that and said, well, look, I'm comfortable with you. I would like to call you back in the future when we're in town. Does that work? I said, absolutely. And then she handed me an additional $1,200 for the time and for the situation. And I left, and that was the first encounter. Over the next 2.5 years, specifically from fall of 2012 to spring of 2015, I would periodically be called back for similar encounters every 3 to 4 months, pretty much consistently, from what I understood, when they would be local in New York City. The encounters stayed very, very routinely specific to, start out on the couches with baby oil, but every time after the first scenario, it escalated to sexual acts, which could include oral and penetrative sex. As a male stripper, you always walk a fine line of prostitution. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of male strippers, we don't even look at it that way, right? Because you never advertise yourself as sex for sale. It's always based on dancing, but you will get propositions that sounds like, do you do one-on-one shows? Do you do massages? Do you do these type of things that you can tell the nature of it can easily lead to sex? And you kind of have to make your choices from there. So prior to the Miss Ventura, Mr. Combs situation, I had been propositioned in those manners. But honestly, I didn't look at it as a business. I kind of would make the decision based on attraction, right? If it was a woman that I was attracted to that asked for a one-on-one, then I'll probably do it because I don't mind it going to the next level, right? But if it was a woman or a situation that I was uncomfortable with, I would probably turn it down because it really wasn't a business for me. It was just kind of like a opportunity that came about from time to time that you had to read between the lines. Being involved in these situations for this duration of time, 2.5 years, it really took me to about a year to 15 months in to finally figure out who they were. After the first encounter, I definitely did my Google search. I was very curious to who this couple could be. I did not recognize Miss Ventura at the time. She had a very specific hairstyle, her head being shaved, which I think I would have recognized, but she always wore wigs. And as I said, Mr. Combs was completely covered. And it just so happened, again, probably about a year to 15 months in, prior to our sexual interaction, there would be a lot of waiting time. I may show up at 2 a.m., but we may not interact till 5. So I would be put in extra rooms or just in an area to kind of just hang out and wait. And one of these specific hotels, they put me in an extra room, and to kill time, I decided to cut on the TV. And the hotel had a welcome message for the guests. And I saw on the screen, Essex House would like to welcome Mr. Sean Combs. And it was like no way, like a holy crap moment. And it made me feel honestly like an idiot because the entire time I had followed him on Instagram, so I'm seeing his post. I'm seeing him on my phone, and I have no idea that I'm in this very intimate environment with him of a few every couple of months. Going into that session right now I am on super anxious, high alert, worry. And so because it took a different dynamic, right? So my initial worries was, the husband being jealous, right? Or something happens that he doesn't like, and then that becomes an issue. My concern then escalates because I'm a heterosexual male, and growing up, none of it is confirmed. I don't know if it was true or not, but growing up, there were large rumors of Mr. Combs' sexuality, right? Could he be bisexual? So going into the sessions after that, it became a worry of, well, if those rumors are true, I don't want to be subject to a sexual advance that I'm uncomfortable with. And how do I handle it? How do I manage it? If it goes there, this, that, and the other. So just added another element of discomfort. But luckily for me, there was never any lines crossed or any advances on a level of him trying to move towards me. So I dodged that. So as time went on, everything really stayed extremely routine. So, from the very first explanation of what was required, it was told to me to not look at him, not speak to him, not acknowledge him. And that really stayed the course the entire time. And even Mr. Combs' interactions with Miss Ventura in my presence, I understand now, looking back at the scenario, that there was a really diligent effort to I guess hide his identity. So that pattern would be very little communication between the two of them in my presence. Him always across the room and far distances away. And if they did have to have an extensive communication, there was always a cue where they both left the room and spoke outside of my presence. So I literally went this entire time, these entire 2.5 years, like I said, without a word, without a conversation, honestly, without even direct eye contact in any of these sessions. Mr. Combs' only interaction during these sessions were basically subtle directions of his preference, which would mainly be centered around visual cues. Move the candle, like the rooms were always candlelit. So it would be, move the candle to the right, maybe a little bit more, position your body, position him, because he would not talk directly to me. So it would maybe be instruction to her for me to position myself a certain way. And that was pretty much the bulk of his interaction or his instructions in regards to this sexual environment that we were in. Yeah, so I am aware of her testimony and her expression of her experiences and her being under duress or forced, possibly. But I never had that experience. Every time I was in this environment, it seemed consented. It seemed like it was a scenario where she was not under the influence in her right mind. And we had very friendly, cordial banter before and after. So I got no cues that there was an issue with what was going on, at least in my part. So I maintained a state of denial about testifying in this case, probably literally up to about 3 days before I took the stand. I had originally been contacted by investigators in the spring of 2024. And at the time that I had been contacted, there was not yet any charges, any arrest, or anything associated with Mr. Combs. So investigators kind of approached me with a very relaxed vibe, saying, hey, look, we're just doing our due diligence. Your name came up. We want to just ask you what your involvement was from your version, because apparently if they show up at my building, they already know, right? So I naively tried to make my own interpretation of the law and assumed, I'm insignificant and there's no way I'll be testifying. So I just told them my involvement. I disqualified myself from sex trafficking because I lived in New York and I only seen them in New York. And obviously, as I stated, I didn't see any violence, any drug use, anything to that nature. So I kind of just was in denial that they're just doing their preliminary work and I would never be called back. So this first meeting was May of 2024, and I didn't hear anything back to the end of December of 2024. And even in that scenario where I was reached out, it wasn't, we're going to use you. It was, we have to turn over our notes to the defense. So the defense is going to know we spoke to you and you could be contacted. We just want to give you a heads up. And I'm like, well, sure, no problem. Like, okay, thanks for letting me know. And the only cue that was odd was at the end of that conversation, I was asked, do you need an attorney? And I'm like, well, why do I need an attorney, right? I'm not significantly involved. And so then another few months passed. We got all the way to maybe late March, early April. And I got a call back and it said, hey, do you still need that attorney? And so I just said, hey, look, man, why do I need an attorney? Nobody contacted me from the defense, like what's going on. And then it was said, we may use you. Right. So at that time, I took the offer of offering me an attorney. That kind of just got set up, and sometime during April, I was called in for these extensive interviews, and similar to what happened in spring of 2024, but now the interviews are like literally 4 or 5 hours long, So I'm giving all my information, still not thinking they're just doing due diligence. And then it escalated probably about 10 days before the trial that, hey, look, we're going to use you. Going into that courtroom, whatever way I played it out on my head and had an assumption of being prepared, it wasn't even close. I hadn't seen 100 episodes of Judge Judy, and I tell you, it is nothing like that, man. I really went in there expecting Judge Judy and the magnitude of a federal courtroom and the tension and the seriousness and all that comes with the weight of your testimony deciding people's lives. It was extremely overwhelming. I consider myself a very calm, level-headed, not easily shaken dude. And I experienced what I believe is an anxiety attack. Walking into that room, my hands started to tremble. And I had difficulty speaking. I was losing my voice. I was going through like a whole whirlwind of overwhelming emotion. And honestly, the only thing that I think saved me and my testimony was I was lucky enough to be called up like 10 minutes before lunch. So I got sworn in. They asked me a couple of preliminary questions that was easy to answer, right? And then they broke for lunch. And I really needed that, man. When they took me into the room to hold me for lunch was 30 minutes, and I must have stood by a window trembling for the first 15, 20 minutes. It took a long time to compose myself. And to this moment, I still really don't know why. I can't connect what the feeling was or what caused it, but it was just like an overwhelming nature just being in that environment. It was so tough. And in this case, it was almost like I was testifying for like the mafia boss in one of those movies. Like, if they send 2 federal agents to get you. They grab you, they stick you in the back of the car. You get to the courthouse, they rush you in past the paparazzi, and then they kind of just sit you in a room and the agents are there in the room with you. And like they confiscate your phone and you're just sitting there for hours waiting to be called. And this happened multiple days because they don't know how soon the witness is before you, how long their testimony is going to take, how long they're going to be on the stand. So I testified on Tuesday afternoon, but I was there in a room for hours all Monday, just sitting in a room, never got called, went home, we're coming back to get you the next day, then you're sitting in a room, bunch of hours, and you don't know what's going to go on. But when I got into the courtroom between the anxiety and me being nervous and stuff like that, I specifically did everything in my power to avoid any type of eye contact. Literally any eye contact with anyone. I didn't want to look at attorneys. I didn't want to look at the jury. I didn't want to look at his possible family in the crowd, these type of people, because, when you're testifying in a trial and what you say can impact so many people's lives, the victims, the accused, the stuff like that. It's just, you don't want to be a part of that, man. You don't want to be a part of ruining somebody's life one way or the other, right? So, I was compelled to do it. And what I wanted to portray on the stand was zero bias, right? I wanted to just give my facts, give the details without any indication that I have a preference, a leg in the race, anything. And, for me to get on the stand and do that comfortably, I wanted to kind of just block everything out, answer the questions from just a very, very calm, factual place, and then just get out of there. I was concerned myself that the wrong type of eye contact, the wrong type of visual cues and stuff like that could affect me, right? Could make me second guess what I would say or wouldn't say So I just avoided eye contact to the fullest. I'm still kind of confused myself why I was called to as a witness. As I said, I always thought my testimony was not significant. If I have to give any cues to what was, I guess, kind of be proven, and this is just my thoughts, this wasn't conveyed to me by the prosecution, is the fact that he gave directions and there was a understanding that my presence there was to create a scene for him. Maybe that was a trying to prove a support of a control aspect, right? And also I did notice at times subtly frustration, right? Frustrated reactions from Miss Ventura, but I never read these reactions as distress or anything. It was literally just frustration to me because some of the directions were very specific. So, we're in an intimate setting and it's like, did you move the candle? Move it a little more. Move it a little more. You know what I'm saying? All right, you turn to the right a little bit more. So those instructions in the midst of trying to create an intimate sexual moment can start to become frustrating. So that's what I read it as. And that's really the only way I read it. So I don't know if those reactions from her was something maybe the prosecution was trying to show as an additional scenario of discomfort for her. But I couldn't testify to that because that's just not honestly how I perceived it. I'm still involved in the male stripping business, right? And so as I stated earlier, I never saw myself as an escort, right? I never operated from a place of selling sex as a service. So it doesn't change my view of the business per se. Obviously, I look at propositions completely different, right? So that's something I would completely shy away from after being in this type of magnitude of a scenario from interacting. But I don't look at the business different on a whole. Actually, in terms of those type of propositions and stuff in this day and age, is actually way more common than 2012. There's a lot of couples that come to the event with the desire of a husband wanting his wife to interact, and then they will proposition guys after the show. And that's weekly. It happens every weekend. In regards to my feelings and my apologies to Miss Ventura, again, it's just the understanding, right? When you hear a person went through and what they would call like a horrific, right, experience, and regardless if I saw it firsthand or not, I know I participated, right? I have to take her at her word, right? And if she says that she was doing all this stuff under duress, and I know I participated, I could be the cause of some of that terrible experience, right, that she went through. So if she was able to keep a straight face and not allude to what her actual experience was, but that is in fact what was going on, I would apologize for even being involved in some way, because at the end of the day, knowingly or not knowingly, I contributed.